Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel. The Texas quarterback room is going to look a little bit different after the latest defection to the transfer portal. This edition of On Texas Football is brought to you by our friends at Duck Camp. Duck Camp makes gear for folks who live for being out there, whether that's in a duck blind at sunrise or on the 40 acres for a Saturday kickoff. Born right here in Austin, Duck Camp builds best-in-class hunting and fishing apparel that works just as well for a full day in the field as it does for a long day of tailgating. From sun protection shirts that keep you cool during those early season scorchers to their iconic game series hats that feel like instant classics, Duck Camp gear is ready for football season, hunting season, and every season in between. Get out there, stay out there, and hook them. Shop Duck Camp at duckcamp.com. And On Texas Football fam, don't forget to use the promo code ONTexas25. That's ONTexas25 for your 25% off at duckcamp.com. CJ Trey Owens is headed to the transfer portal. He announced it on social media on Monday morning. This is one that, based on CJ, just look as simple as seeing the travel roster for SEC games. And when we noticed he wasn't traveling, maybe even before that, the writing's been on the wall for this one for a while.
Yeah, and it's a bit unfortunate, but look, only one quarterback can play at a time, right? And Texas obviously has a very talented one, and we've seen it already in the Sarkisian era that, when you're a backup quarterback, it's very difficult to find the field considering, what Texas typically has at stake as its starting quarterback. So for Trey, it makes a lot of sense. You're doing not a whole lot, but wasting your eligibility and your time in college if you remain at the University of Texas. So the big hope here is that the development behind the scenes, some of the fine tuning of mechanics and accuracy, that all improved during his time in Austin. So now he can go out and obviously find somewhere that will put him on the field and allow him to play to his potential.
Well, when you look at Trey Owens' career at Texas, it's one that doesn't have a ton of on-field highlights. But CJ, I just commend him for understanding the situation he was walking into. But we knew, everybody I think knew, whoever Texas was going to take at quarterback, whoever the guy was going to be, was going to have to be someone that was betting on themselves and had kind of that competitive sickness about them, knowing, hey, I'm following Arch Manning in the recruiting cycle. Yeah. And to Trey Owens' credit, he had a great senior season. He came to Texas. You go back to the spring game, his first spring at Texas, we saw the arm talent. And it looked like a really good evaluation by Sark and A.J. Milwee. But as you said, CJ, it just ends up being a deal where you can only have one on the field at a time. Guys understand that the eligibility clock is ticking. And when it was apparent at one point this season that, hey, either he had fallen behind KJ Lacey or KJ Lacey had passed him, whatever the situation was, you knew Trey Owens was probably going to have to find somewhere else to play if he wanted to play.
Yeah, I think so. And look, I to your point, I want to commend Trey and his family, right? This is a difficult situation, committing behind Arch Manning, obviously everything that went on with Ewers to Manning, and then, what was to follow. Look, that's a tough spot, but you didn't really ever hear a peep out of your backup quarterback with Trey Owens, right? Never heard anything about being unhappy. He went in and day out, did his job, and of course, that job now takes him somewhere else. But look, 27 career snaps. He was 2 of 4 passing, 19 yards on those 2 completions. The writing was on the wall, as you mentioned, Jeff. And I think that specific moment where it became very apparent was that Florida game when Texas traveled 3 quarterbacks to the swamp, one of them including KJ Lacey. And Trey Owens did not make that trip. That's when it was very clear to me early on that there had been a jumping in the depth chart. And obviously we hear Sarkisian talk about KJ Lacey. And when he's on the field, I look back at this quote, when he's on the field, the ball just moves. Now, I don't know what that means for Trey Owens, but you kind of saw what Sarkisian meant when it came to the depth chart and ultimately, the favor of the quarterback pecking order with Owens and Lacey there. So look, that leaves us with 3 quarterbacks for 2026, right, Jeff? So Arch Manning returns. KJ Lacey will be there. Matthew Caldwell is out of eligibility, so he will be off to his next endeavor as well. And now with Owens hitting the portal, you're stuck with a 5-star freshman, Dia Bell, coming in to be that 3rd quarterback. Talented room, but ultimately it wouldn't surprise me if they looked for another Matthew Caldwell-esque just to keep the numbers there.
Well, I was going to get there at some point, but let's go ahead and get there now since you brought it up. I mean, I know Sark didn't mention it during the signing day press conference. And look, I wouldn't expect Sark or any head coach to lay out their transfer portal plan for public consumption. But I would think, CJ, I don't know if they're going to necessarily force it, but hey, if something pops up where they can get a Matthew Caldwell type guy, again, it's going to have to be a guy like Matthew Caldwell that really understands the situation you're walking into. Don't come to Texas with illusions of grandeur thinking, hey, I'm going to go compete with Arch Manning for QB1. Yeah. No, you're going to be a serviceable QB2 competing with KJ Lacey for that role, and maybe Diabell. We'll see where he is on the learning curve, but you're there. You're the break glass in case of emergency option. And the good news, CJ, Matthew Caldwell proved, hey, you can find a guy in the portal that is competent and willing to take on that role.
Yeah, you know, for guys around the country who are kind of coming to terms that maybe the NFL is not for them, but they want to stick in football, come basically take a grad year at the University of Texas. Get a kickstart on your coaching career, right? I think that's kind of the market Texas could be in for the quarterback position, should they deem that they need an extra body in that room right now. Again, those three, I think, is as deep as the quarterback talent has ever been at Texas when you consider – you know, what Texas will be having in that 2026 quarterback room. But ultimately, look, experience is a big trump card when it comes to the quarterback position. And aside from Arch Manning, you don't really have any. So that's going to be a big selling point for me as we continue to monitor the portal, Jeff.
We'll see ultimately what the staff does with their quarterback take in 2027.
Yeah.
But when you look at the depth chart right now with Arch Manning, with KJ Lacey, and with Diabell, especially with KJ, with Dia, and we know Kavian Bryant was their guy for 2027 initially. He's since committed to Texas Tech. But it really does seem, CJ, like Sark and AJ Milwee and the guys in charge of evaluating quarterbacks, they really want to have the dimension at quarterback of, I know the term dual threat gets thrown out there and people can use that however they want, but it seems like they really want to recruit the quarterback position to get a guy that has the ability to, number one, extend plays with his legs, and two, if push comes to shove, if you really need it, you can have the element of a quarterback run game with your quarterback takes from now on.
Look, you mentioned Kavian Bryant in that 2027 class. Another guy that I've mentioned and a guy that's been on campus a couple times now this season is Ty Knutson down out of Smithson Valley. He's got a number of offers, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Kansas State. They all came back earlier in the summer. So, look, Texas is kind of toying around now that they're looking elsewhere at the quarterback position. That wouldn't be one that surprised me a whole lot considering, 6'3", talented football player, good arm, but he can move, Jeff, and that's kind of what we're talking about with the dual threat ability. I would keep an eye there moving forward because, again, you get a 5-star in 2026 and that 28 class as well, just reading what we've seen moving forward and also looking back at what Texas has done previously under Sarkisian. It's kind of a gap here in between when heavy quarterback classes arise. 2028 is going to be loaded, and Texas is right in the thick of things for a number of the top quarterbacks in that class already.
CJ, for you, what should the realistic expectations be for Diabell his first year on campus? Because you look, the tools are off the charts. Football character is off the charts. Leadership off the charts. He checks a lot of boxes you want in a guy to be the face of the franchise. But right out of the gate, what should be the realistic expectations?
I don't think there should be any. I think this is one for Diabell. Hey, you know what you're coming into, right? Arch Manning is the quarterback at the University of Texas. If anything, put yourself into a position to be called on should something happen to Arch, right? And I'm knocking on wood here. Don't want that to happen. But the point is, you need to find a way to get an understanding of the playbook and understanding of the offense enough that should your number be called, you can walk in the same way that we saw with Matthew Caldwell in 2025 and execute moments, right? And that's to say that he beats out KJ Lacey. Right now, I'm not going to guarantee that. I think KJ Lacey is a fantastic quarterback in his own right, but that's kind of the position as a third quarterback on the list to come in and say, all right, if they need me for a snap or two or even a series, I can find a way to execute and do my job well enough to move the football.
CJ, as we wrap it up, I know Sark has his pros and cons as a coach, and some people like some of the things Sark does. Some people aren't fans of some of the things he does. I, for one, though, am thankful that at least under his watch, quarterback has almost been out of sight, out of mind, because hey, whether it's been Quinn, even go back to year one with Hudson Card and Casey Thompson, then you go to Quinn, you had Malik Murphy for a couple of games, then you go to Arch. They've managed to figure out quarterback and make it work, and you feel really good with Sark heading up quarterback evaluations and development in Texas.
Yeah, it was a a long time coming since you've seen back-to-back quarterbacks with as much talent and potential at the University of Texas. It's a position you don't worry about. Now it's about fulfilling the rest of the positions around them to ultimately maximize that offense.
Absolutely. CJ, thank you for the knowledge and expertise as always. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to our friends over at Duck Camp for sponsoring this edition of On Texas Football. If you're not a member over at On Texas Football, that's all right. You can get over to the site right now and sign up using the promo code OTFOG, and that'll get you 1 year of access for $39.95. Make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or on the site, you're not missing any of our Longhorn coverage all year round, including coverage of the transfer portal and roster acquisition throughout the offseason. For CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, welcome.